Dr. Lecter, my name is Clarice Starr.
Narrating one of the greatest stories in psychological terror, The Silence of the Lambs was a smash hit when released on Valentine's Day in 1991. A movie that will leave you scared to your bones, The Silence of the Lambs is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. However, while you might want to get wrapped up in its video progress, some weird and fascinating experiences happened in the scenes that many people may not be aware of. Stick with us as we bring you 20 such weird facts about The Silence of the Lambs. Number 20. The movie is based on a book series, The Silence of the Lambs. The movie began life as a book in 1988 written by Thomas Harris. The movie boasted some incredible camera work by Tak Fujimoto, superb direction from Jonathan Demme, and great central performances by Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, and Ted Levine. Thomas is basically only known for the Hannibal Lecter novels. He has written 6 novels in his life, and 4 of them are about Lecter. It is the second of 4 Harris books featuring Hannibal Lecter as a main character. While The Silence of the Lambs is the first movie based on a Harris book, it was not the first book he wrote featuring Lecter. The first book in the series is Red Dragon, which came out in 1981. However, the first book was turned into the third Lecter film. The plot of Red Dragon pairs Hannibal with William Graham, the man who captured him. The third book is Hannibal, which follows Clarice and Hannibal 7 years after the events of Lambs, and the fourth is Hannibal Rising, which follows Hannibal's childhood. All 4 books have since been adapted to film, 3 of which star Anthony Hopkins as the main character. Number 19. Hannibal rarely blinked throughout the movie. You'll notice that throughout the movie, Hannibal rarely blinked. This was a deliberate decision by actor Anthony Hopkins. A lot of people found this disturbing and it made him seem even more creepy. Anthony got the idea from crocodiles and lizards who rarely blink, and if they do, it's intentional. Blinking is something humans do many times in a minute. Seeing someone do it as infrequently as possible is both unnerving and disturbing. This goes to tell how far Anthony Hopkins will go to see the success of his movies. He was so in character with Lecter, he even began to mimic him off-screen. It spooked the hell out of the production crew, but even they had to admit that his acting was spot on, and his character as Hannibal was one of his best roles ever. Number 18. It also featured some famous people in a cameo.
Is giving you some length of bone, but you're not more than 1 generation from poor white trash.
In one of the scenes, when the officers pulled Clarice away from Hannibal in Memphis, you could see a bearded man in the background with a suit and tie. This was filmmaker George Romero, most famous for his classic zombie films, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Apparently, he also wanted to feature in a movie about cannibalism. Although a background character, he made a short appearance in the film that didn't go unnoticed by many. A masterpiece in itself, it's no surprise that the movie attracted several famous movie stars. Together, with each playing their role, no matter how small or insignificant it was, they were able to pull off one of the greatest psychological thrillers ever made. Nothing beats a job well done. Number 17. Gene Hackman wanted to write the screenplay. Gene had tried to write the screenplay from the book, but apparently ended up copying the whole book. Sources say that Ted Talley, the man who eventually wrote the screenplay, had warned Hackman that it was hard to write a screenplay for a movie. Hackman, however, seemed determined to do just that. 50 pages into the book, he had already written 50 pages of the screenplay, which was a copy and paste job. However, Orion's president, Mike Medavoy, begged Ted to meet with Hackman and convince him to let him write the script instead. Ted succeeded, and we got the awesome script for Silence of the Lambs. The script was so good that it even won an Oscar award. Ted had to be really careful when writing the script. He wanted to focus less on the violence and more on the psychological silence. If you have checked, the movie is not as gory as the book itself. Instead, it tries to make the movie captivating with its dramatic suspense and chilling scenes portraying fear of the unknown. Number 16. Jodie Foster's reaction to Anthony Hopkins. Mocking her accent was real. Their first meeting, when Anthony Hopkins mocked Jodie Foster's accent, was not in the script. Jodie didn't expect it and was genuinely hurt. Jodie had always been insecure about her accent, and the fact that Anthony decided to bring it up out of nowhere made her angry and hurt. Her reaction to him mocking her accent was genuine. However, later on, she went to thank Anthony for provoking such a genuine reaction. After her interaction with Lecter, she felt liberated from a stigma she had carried, thanks to his words, and gained more confidence in herself. After all, if Hannibal Lecter can't break you, then no one else can. Number 5. Anthony Hopkins wasn't the first choice for the role of Hannibal Lecter.
You know how quickly the boys found you, all those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars, while you could...
Jonathan Demme wanted Anthony Hopkins for the role of Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter from the beginning, but felt that Anthony did not have the box office allure that he later gained. Apart from that, someone had already starred as Hannibal Lecter in another movie. In 1986, before Harris had even written Silence of the Lambs, the film Manhunter was released. It featured Brian Cox in the role of Hannibal Lecter, but the movie was a flop, and Brian moved on in search of greener pastures. Jonathan wanted to pick someone already famous, so he asked Sean Connery to take the role. Sean took a look at the script and called it revolting and rejected it. Hence, Anthony Hopkins ended up as Lecter. If he had rejected the role, then John Lithgow would have played a serial killer in his place. However, Anthony got the role, and he couldn't have been more perfect for the part. Number 14. Gene Hackman wanted to make the film. Hackman bought the rights to the 1988 Thomas Harris book for $500,000, which he split the cost with production company Orion. He wanted to direct the movie and play Lecter. However, Talley remembered the actor not being sure about being able to do both, thinking maybe he would instead play FBI agent Jack Crawford, head of the Behavioral Sciences Department. Hackman decided to play Crawford, with John Hurt as Lecter and Michelle Pfeiffer playing FBI trainee Clarice Starling. Hackman later sold his rights to Orion for reasons he did not disclose. Some say his daughter read the book and told him straight to his face that he would not be making that movie. As a man who has a soft spot for his kid, he was quick to oblige. Others claim that he had been too busy producing other movies and didn't see much hope for a horror movie, so when Orion offered to buy his rights, he let it go with no hard feelings. Number 13. Buffalo Bill was inspired by real-life killers. The inspiration for the character Buffalo Bill was a combination of 3 different serial killers: Ed Gein, who used to skin his victims and make lampshades out of them; Gary Heidnik, who would entrap his female victims in a specially made torture basement; and Ted Bundy, who wore a fake cast on his arm to lure in his victims. Buffalo Bill planned to use the skin of the women he caught to make a woman's suit for himself. Real-life serial killer Ed Gein also fashioned women's corpses into clothing, furniture, and various keepsakes. One of the items found in his house following his arrest was a corset made out of female human skin. Buffalo Bill used a ploy to lure Catherine into his truck. He wrapped his arm in a cast so she wouldn't feel threatened. This was also the modus operandi of real-life serial assassin Ted Bundy, who would use fake injuries to lure his victims and provoke their sympathy. Bundy murdered over 30 women and girls and was executed in 1989, 2 years before The Silence of the Lambs was released. Harris later disclosed that his characters were based on people in real life and had gotten the idea for the book when he had been asked to write for a magazine about the inmates on death row when he was 23. He spoke to one of the prisoners there who had been a surgeon and dissected his patients so he could fit them into small boxes. After having conversations with him, Harris began to do more research into other serial assassins, and thus the legend of Hannibal Lecter was born. Number 12. Jodie Foster was denied at first. Jodie Foster read the book and was blown away by the plot. She wanted to buy the rights to the book but found out that Hackman had beaten her to it. She also had to wait for the opportunity to play Clarice Starling because Jonathan Demme wasn't keen on her Boston accent in The Accused, which she acted in 1988 even though she won an Oscar for it. She had even flown from her hometown to explain to Demme why she should at least be his second choice, even when she knew he had Michelle in mind. When asked why she wanted to star in the movie so badly, she explained that in all her past roles, she had been the victim, but starring as Starling would allow her to be a hero who fought against evil. Demme's first choice was Michelle Pfeiffer, who found the movie too dark. She was unable to come to terms with the overpowering darkness of the piece, claiming that there was such evil in the movie. She was also uncomfortable with the ending, claiming that at the end of the movie, it is evil that won, and for such a dark piece, she had hoped for the movie to end on a light note. When they told her that it wasn't possible, she turned down the role as quickly as possible. Demme's second choice was Meg Ryan, However, she also found the movie too grisly for her taste. Laura Dern was also suggested, but the studio felt she was not a big enough star. This opened the door for Foster. As a woman who had always played the victim, Foster was excited to finally cast the role of a woman who decides to face her challenges head-on rather than cower and hide. Once Demi met Foster, who had zero reservations about taking the part, having never shied away in her films from confronting what lurks in the darker recesses of humanity, he knew she was perfect for the part of the tough and determined Clarice, whose vulnerability brims just below the surface. Number 11. Hannibal made a medical joke about a liver he ate. There's a Reddit thread that hypothesizes Hannibal was making a medical joke when he said, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." Liver, fava beans, and wine are all inhibitors of monoamine oxidase, which were used to treat psychiatric disorders. Hopkins' now iconic lip roll sound after his fava beans speech was inspired by Bela Lugosi's iconic title performance in Dracula. This goes to show how vast his knowledge is. People who have met Anthony Hopkins have described him as a very intelligent person, with an aura of mystery around him. If you looked into his eyes, you would always feel that there was something he knew that you didn't. Number 10. Hopkins won an Oscar but wasn't in the film much. Hopkins was rewarded for his efforts when he won the award for Best Actor at the Oscars. While this fact alone is not surprising, what makes it weird is the fact that Hopkins was only on screen for just 16 minutes. It is the second shortest screen time to win Best Actor, the first being won by David Niven, who was in Separate Tables in 1958 for 15 minutes. This shows what an impact Hopkins made in those 16 minutes, and most people can agree that he really deserved that award. In the movie, it was Hopkins' idea to be dressed in all white. He planned to use our dear doctors and dentists who usually wear that color to play with our psyche. To some extent, it strangely worked. Number 9. The film ended Hopkins' real-life relationship. While the movie Silence of the Lambs was successful, it led to some serious losses for Hopkins. He was in a relationship with retail businesswoman Martha Stewart at the time, and things had been rosy and sweet until the premiere of the movie. After watching the movie, she grew cold and distant and began to avoid Hopkins. Alarmed, Hopkins tried to figure out what was wrong, but she couldn't seem to look him in the eye. Shortly after the film's release, she dumped him and finally confessed her reason for being distant. The image of him as Hannibal Lecter was etched into her brain, and whenever she saw him, all she saw when looking at him was a cold-blooded serial assassin. Also, due to her iconic role, she felt embarrassed introducing him to people as someone she was in a relationship with, because when he looked at them, they felt uncomfortable. Number 8. The crew created a board game called the Gum Game. Despite the subject matter, Demi kept the atmosphere on set upbeat. Given the movie's production was a grim and solemn affair, he decided to do whatever he could to liven up the atmosphere. To distract themselves from the trauma and horror, he and the crew came up with a board game called the Gum Game. The object of the game was to save Catherine, and it had cards that said things like, liposuction, go back 2 spaces. It worked, and the crew looked forward to their breaks where they could try to rescue Catherine from the clutches of a psychopath. The game brought a feeling of closeness and unity within the crew, and made them feel at home on set. Together, they were able to break records and have their names idolized in the movie industry. Number 7. Bill's dance was Ted Levine's idea. One of the disturbing scenes in the movie is where Buffalo Bill, played by Ted Levine, dances in nothing but a butterfly silk robe in a dressing room. The scene was not in the script, although it was mentioned in the novel. Ted Levine completely improvised the moves for Buffalo Bill's infamous dance scene on the spot, but he did have a few shots of tequila for some courage beforehand. He claimed that the scene added some depth to his character. The dance represented the joy of a man who had made plans, and everything was going smoothly. Although fans would agree that the scene made the movie more disturbing, it also made him look more unhinged. The song he danced to was Goodbye Horses by Q Lazarus. This was Levine's suggestion because it was originally going to be Her Strut by Bob Seger. Goodbye Horses was sung by Q Lazarus, a reclusive singer who disappeared from public view shortly after the release of the movie. For some time, film fans speculated that she had passed away. However, she was discovered to be alive and well in 2018, working as a bus driver in Staten Island. No one knows why she quit music and moved away. Maybe she was horrified by the movie in which her song premiered and did not want to be reminded of it. Or could it be that she lost interest in music and opted for a simple, quiet life? We may never know unless she tells us. Number 6. The actress who played Catherine had to gain weight for her role. Brooke Smith got the gig as Catherine Martin on the condition that she gained 25 pounds. At first, her manager asked her to refuse the role, telling her that if she put on weight, it would be hard for her to lose it, but Brooke insisted. Her love for acting and her passion and dedication to the art shone through, and she said she didn't mind, and she understood that it would be difficult to shed it later. However, the pain was worth it. They could worry about weight loss later. Seeing how determined she was finally allowed to cast the role. She was put in an acting class with Vincent D'Onofrio, who had put on 75 pounds for the part of Private Pyle in Full Metal Jacket in 1978, and he told her to ask the producers to get her a credit card for her meals. Martin did just that and later joked about it, claiming it was the reason they went over the budget. But it was worth it, as she was able to pull off one of her greatest performances ever. Brooke found it fun. She didn't really have to worry about being skinny for a moment like the rest of the actresses. She could eat whatever she wanted, and with good reason too. To make it even more fun, she was getting paid to add weight. How cool is that? Next. Number 5. Buffalo Bill's house was in Ted Levine's hometown. When Ted Levine was told the location of Buffalo Bill's house, it brought a feeling of nostalgia. First off, it was in his hometown, which was coincidental enough, but then it turned out the house was directly next door to his childhood sweetheart's family home. It was a homecoming where he would be giving one of the greatest performances of his life as a tribute to the place where he grew up. This made the role really personal to him. While the people in his old neighborhood went about their daily lives, something sinister was brewing under the surface, and no one could tell that anything was wrong. Life was filled with both good and bad, but sometimes bad was so good at disguising itself as good that you never really see it until it's too late. Most times, the victims are other people's loved ones, friends, and family. Ted became more grateful for the people he had in his life. He had always heard of those atrocities happening to others, but after his role, he became more sympathetic. Eventually, he even became friends with Catherine on set. He began to call her Patty Hearst, after a young woman who was kidnapped, and eventually became sympathetic toward her captors. Their friendship on set helped Ted a lot. Trying to get into the brain of a serial assassin had left him feeling a bit traumatized. After his role as Buffalo Bill, he went on to act as Monk, a police officer who fought for justice to find a way to heal his mind from the evil of Buffalo Bill. If you think that was creepy, check out the next weird fact. Number 4. The skull on the poster isn't really a skull. One of the iconic landmarks in The Silence of the Lambs is the skull on the back of the moth, which the serial assassin Buffalo Bill put in the throat of his victims. The moth cocoon signified what Bill thought of himself as a pupa on the verge of transforming into a moth. The skull on the moth was also featured on the poster for the film, adding an edge to the whole picture. The movie poster for The Silence of the Lambs famously featured Clarice's face, with her mouth covered by a moth. Almost as iconic as the characters, the poster is one of the great movie illustrations to come out of the 90s. In 2006, it was named the best poster of the last 35 years by the Key Art Awards. However, here's the deal. What looks like a skull on the moth in the poster isn't a skull at all. It's a picture of 7 naked women arranged in the shape of a skull. Salvador Dali's and Voluptas Mors inspired this. The aim was to represent what Buffalo Bill stood for and his ideologies, how he specifically targeted women and felt that their pain and suffering, even their death, was necessary for him to complete his metamorphosis into a woman. What could be scarier than that? Let's see the next one. Number 3. Catherine paid a huge price for her role. Catherine, who will for most people be remembered as the girl in the pit in The Silence of the Lambs, made some huge sacrifices to prepare herself for the role. To prepare for being stuck in a pit in a psychopath's dungeon, she locked herself in her parents' basement closet to mimic the close, dark confines. Before filming, she said she had nightmares about being in that situation and panicking over whether she would try to escape or just give up to her fate. To look like a hunted, frightened animal, she would play mind games with herself, pretending she really did need help. Eventually, she revealed that she had been going through some issues at that time regarding her mental health, which was one of the reasons she decided to play Catherine. Struggling with low self-esteem and thoughts of suicide, she claimed that being Catherine made her examine herself to ask this question: okay, wait a minute, why don't I want to live? This made her realize that she needed help. Shortly after the movie's premiere, she sought therapy, choosing to defy fate and fight to become the woman she had always aspired to be. What other weird facts are there about The Silence of the Lambs? Number 2. The film made headlines at the Oscars. Although a horror movie, The Silence of the Lambs hit a major milestone. At the 1992 Academy Awards, The Silence of the Lambs won 5 awards, which we call the Big Five. It comprises the following categories: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. So much for one movie. Talk about success. This is a testament to its brilliance, especially at the Oscars, where horror doesn't really get a lot of recognition. It was a reward to Hackman and his crew, who had worked tirelessly to reveal to us that life isn't always about roses and fairy tales, but people are willing to put their lives on the line to save us from the darkness. It's only the 3rd film to pick up all 5 in history, and to date, the last one to ever do so. The previous 2 films to pick up the Big Five were It Happened One Night in 1934 and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975. The Silence of the Lambs went on to make almost $273 million at the box office worldwide, which was a shock to Dem. Apparently, he had not banked on the movie being so successful. At most, he thought it would just make the production costs so that they could make up for what had been spent on the film. The success of the movie had come as a shock, and the awards had left him speechless with joy. Number 20. Tom Harris had never seen the big screen adaptation of his book. Even though the adaptation of his book was a huge success, Harris had made up his mind never to watch the movie. It was not because he was unhappy with the deal. He got a huge sum for rights to his book, and it wasn't that he didn't trust the filmmakers. According to Demi, the author simply didn't want to shuffle the characters in his head with actors on screen. This decision came after he witnessed a friend who was also a writer and had seen the adaptation of his book on screen. Apparently, this messed up the plot in his head, and he had trouble merging his ideas with what he had seen on screen. This was a major problem for him for years, and he eventually had to give up on the series. Not wanting this to happen to him, Harris then decided to avoid watching the movie adaptation of his books. He went on to publish 6 other books in the series, with 4 of them getting adapted. That goes to tell you how good Harris is. His talent and ability to get into the darkest of minds and come out unscathed are truly amazing and a bit horrifying. However, we would not love him if he were any different from what he already is. While the cast of The Silence of the Lambs has moved on to bigger and greater things, we will never forget the role they all played in bringing Hannibal Lecter to life. Due to their combined efforts and expertise, the movie was such a hit that people felt it deserved a sequel. Hence, the movie Hannibal was born. However, it did not really do so well as the original, and Jodie Foster was eventually replaced. Nonetheless, one thing stands sure: we won't be forgetting this masterpiece and Anthony Hopkins anytime soon. With a story so grim, it eventually had a musical, which was very unauthorized but had its moments. In 2005, it won Outstanding Musical when it debuted at the New York International Fringe Festival. In 2011, Time magazine named it one of the top 10 plays and musicals of the year. So what do you think? Was The Silence of the Lambs as gory as you thought it was? Was Anthony Hopkins really the best choice for the movie? And would you like to own the gum game? Which of these weird facts got to you the most? Share your thoughts in the comment sections. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, share and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen. See you next time.